The child's scream shattered the sacred ceremony like a stake through ancient glass. Young Alaric Salvatore, who moments before had stood silent beside his father Stefan, suddenly lurched forward with supernatural speed that blurred his small form. His hands still bearing traces of his late mother's witch bloodline in the faint purple veins, visible beneath translucent skin, tore the ceremonial veil from Caroline Forbes' perfectly styled golden hair with a violence that sent pearl pins scattering across the cathedral's marble floor like fallen stars. "Not her!" the 6-year-old cried, his voice cracking with a power far beyond his years. His eyes blazed with an unnatural amber light that pulsed in time with his racing heartbeat, a manifestation of hybrid magic so raw and uncontrolled that even the eldest vampires in attendance stepped back instinctively, their ancient instincts screaming danger. "The ancestors showed me not her. She brings darkness. She brings death." The Salvatore Coven elders exchanged horrified glances, their centuries of composure fracturing in the face of a child's prophetic fury. Whispers rippled through the assembled witnesses like wind through dead leaves. This was unprecedented, forbidden, an abomination of protocol that could unravel the delicate political alliance this union was meant to seal. The veil floated through the air like a ghost given form, catching the colored light streaming through the cathedral's stained glass windows. It drifted past the rigid faces of the Salvatore Coven elders in their black ceremonial robes, past the Forbes family witnesses who sat frozen in shock, their vampire witch hybrid heritage evident in the way magic sparked involuntarily from their fingertips. It floated past the hybrid guards stationed at every pillar, their hands moving to weapons before training forced them still, past the witch council members who began muttering protection spells under their breath. The veil moved with impossible intention, as if guided by invisible hands, until it settled with ethereal grace at the feet of a dark-haired woman standing in the deepest shadows at the back of the cathedral. Bonnie Bennett wore simple grey robes that marked her as servant class, a Bennett witch bound to household magic, the lowest rank in the supernatural hierarchy. For 3 years, she had been invisible in the Salvatore mansion, a ghost among the living, carrying a secret so dangerous it could burn both covens to ash and scatter their ashes to the 4 winds. But Alaric wasn't finished. The child who should have been too young to access his hybrid powers, whose abilities should have remained dormant until his 13th year, who should have been controllable by even the weakest compulsion spell pulled away from Stefan's restraining hands with strength no 6-year-old should possess. His father's grip, strong enough to crush stone, simply slid off the boy's arms as if Stefan were trying to hold smoke. "Alaric, stop!" Stefan's voice carried the alpha command that could freeze any supernatural creature in their tracks, the authority of a coven leader who had ruled for over a century. But his son didn't even pause. The boy crossed the cathedral floor on trembling legs that moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, as if something other than his own will was propelling him forward. Each footstep echoed like a drumbeat in the sudden suffocating silence. 200 supernatural beings watched in paralyzed horror as Alaric Salvatore defied every law of coven hierarchy and ceremony. He picked up the fallen veil with both small hands, his fingers reverent, as if touching something holy. When he lifted it toward Bonnie Bennett, his glowing amber eyes met hers with absolute certainty, the kind of knowing that only comes from divine revelation or madness. And in this moment, no one could tell which. "Her," he whispered, but his voice carried the resonance of ancestral magic, echoing off the stone walls and vaulted ceiling like a prophecy being spoken into existence by the universe itself. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating in the chest of every person present. "The ancestors crowned her in my dream. They showed me the truth written in blood and starlight. She is father's true Luna. She is mother's sister, the hidden one, the denied one, the one who was meant to stand here all along. She is the one who will unite what was broken, heal what was shattered, and make us whole again. Mother's sister. The words detonated in the cathedral like a magical bomb. Gasps erupted from every corner. Caroline Forbes went white as death, her carefully constructed facade cracking to reveal the fury beneath. Stefan stood frozen on the altar platform, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror, as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began falling into terrible place. As the veil touched Bonnie's dark hair, settling on her head like a crown being placed by invisible hands, impossible purple-white light blazed from her skin. It wasn't the soft glow of normal witch magic, or the cold luminescence of vampire power. It was both and neither. Witch magic and vampire bond, intertwining in a display of raw supernatural power that hadn't been witnessed since the original covens were formed 5 centuries ago, when the first vampires and witches had forged their alliance in blood and magic. The light poured from Bonnie's body in waves, illuminating every shadow in the cathedral, making the stained glass windows blaze like they were lit from within by the sun itself. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites that glowed with that same purple-white radiance. Ancient words, in a language dead for millennia, poured from her lips, her voice layered with 1,000 ancestral voices speaking in unison. The cathedral erupted in chaos. Vampires hissed and bared fangs, their predatory natures triggered by the overwhelming surge of magic. Witches began chanting protection spells, their hands weaving defensive barriers. The Forbes family matriarch screamed accusations of witchcraft and manipulation. Coven elders shouted for order, while simultaneously backing away from the raw power radiating from a woman they dismissed as insignificant. But through it all, Stefan Salvatore stood motionless, staring at Bonnie Bennett as if seeing her for the first time. And perhaps he was, because in the blazing light of the lunar bond revealing itself, he could finally see the truth that had been hidden in plain sight for 3 years. The shape of her face that echoed his dead wife, Elena's features. The way she moved that reminded him of someone he'd loved and lost. The reason his son had always gravitated toward this quiet servant with an instinct Stefan had dismissed as childish fancy. Mother's sister. The secret Elena had carried to her grave. The truth that could destroy everything or save them all. But before we witness how this forbidden moment reshapes 2 ancient bloodlines, before we see how a hidden sister can become a coven's salvation, before we understand the full weight of the choice Stefan Salvatore must make between political alliance and ancestral destiny, let me take you back 3 years. Back to the night Stefan made a choice that would doom or save his lineage, to the blood-soaked birthing chamber where Elena Gilbert took her last breath and whispered a secret that would haunt him for years. Back to the moment when a promise was made and a sister was hidden away, when love and duty collided and left scars that only truth could heal. This is the story of how a child's vision exposed a leader's greatest loss and revealed a coven's truest Luna. This is the story of Bonnie Bennett, the servant who carried her sister's legacy in silence, the witch who was always meant to wear the crown, the Luna who would unite what centuries of tradition had torn apart. This is the story of how destiny, once set in motion by ancestral magic and a dying woman's final wish, cannot be denied, not by political alliances, not by social hierarchies, not even by the man who must choose between the past he grieves and the future he fears. Stefan Salvatore had held many things in his immortal life weapons: power, the throats of his enemies, but nothing had ever felt as fragile as the infant in his arms. Alaric's cries filled the chamber, high and desperate, competing with the wet, labored breathing of the woman dying in the bed before him. "Promise me." Elena's voice was barely a whisper, blood staining her lips as crimson as the sheets beneath her. Her hand, cold and trembling, reached for his. "Promise me you'll love him, with everything you have. Always." The word broke on Stefan's tongue. He'd promised her forever when they'd mated, carved their bond into his very soul, and now forever was ending in a room that reeked of iron and loss. Elena's eyes, those eyes that had once looked at him with something almost like love, flickered toward the corner where shadows pooled. "And take care of Bonnie. She needs you, even though she'll never ask." Stefan followed her gaze to the slight figure pressed against the wall, the Bennett witch who'd attended the birth. Bonnie's face was carefully blank, her green eyes reflecting nothing but candlelight. He didn't understand. She was just a servant, one of the minor witches who served the household. Why would Elena waste her dying breaths on... But Elena's hand went slack in his, and there were no more words, no more explanations. Only the baby's cries and the terrible, infinite silence that followed. 3 years later, Stefan stood in his study and made another promise, this one to himself and his pack. Caroline Forbes would be his second Luna. The alliance would secure the eastern territories, strengthen both their houses, and give Alaric the mother he needed. It was logical, strategic, everything a good alpha did for his pack. He told himself he felt nothing when he signed the betrothal contract. In the kitchens below, Bonnie Bennett scrubbed blood from the butcher's block and pretended not to hear the celebrations echoing through the mansion. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, magic humming just beneath her skin, carefully contained. 3 years of servitude had taught her to make herself small, unremarkable, a shadow that the Salvatores looked through rather than at. She heard footsteps young, unsteady, and didn't need to turn to know who approached. "Bonnie." Alaric's voice was small, uncertain. "Father says I'm getting a new mother." She dried her hands and knelt to his level, meeting eyes that were Elena's eyes, housed in a face that would grow to resemble the vampire she hated most in this world. The little boy who was her nephew, though he would never know it, her sister's son, her promise. "That's good," she said softly, smoothing his dark hair. "Every little boy should have a mother. But I want you." His lower lip trembled. "You tell the best stories. You make the nightmares go away. Take care of Bonnie. She needs you." Elena had been wrong about so many things. Bonnie didn't need Stefan Salvatore. She needed him dead. Needed his entire bloodline erased for what they'd done to the Bennetts, for the massacre that had left her the last of her line. She needed to watch this mansion burn. But she'd made a promise to her sister, whispered over Elena's cooling body while Stefan had been too consumed by grief to notice. A promise to protect this child, to keep him safe from the darkness that lived in his own blood. So Bonnie smiled and lied. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be here." Alaric threw his arms around her neck, and she held him, this piece of Elena, this child of her enemy. Above them, she could hear music starting, vampires gathering to celebrate their alpha's new beginning. She held the boy tighter and swallowed her hatred like poison. Some promises were worth keeping, even when they destroyed you. 6 years before Stefan Salvatore held his dying mate, Bonnie Bennett held her own mother's hand and learned what it meant to be a secret. "Your father loved me." Her mother's voice rattled in her chest, each word a battle against the cancer eating her alive. "John Gilbert loved me, Bonnie, but not enough. Not enough to claim her. Not enough to make Bonnie legitimate. Not enough to do anything but hide them away like a shameful mistake while he returned to his proper family, to his wife, to his daughter, Elena, to the life that had no room for a half-breed witch born from an affair. "Elena knows about you," her mother whispered, and Bonnie's heart stopped. "She's known for years. She wants to meet you, to know her sister, but John won't allow it. He says it would destroy everything: the Gilbert name, his wife's health, Elena's prospects. He says some secrets are kindnesses." Bonnie had laughed then, a bitter sound that didn't belong in a dying woman's bedroom. Kindness, as if ignorance was mercy, as if being erased was a gift. Her mother died 3 days later, and Bonnie burned the small cottage they'd shared, watching smoke carry away the last evidence of her childhood. She had nothing, no family, no home, no place in a world that measured worth by bloodline and legitimacy. She had only a sister who knew she existed, and a desperate, foolish need to be near her. The Salvatore household had needed a Bennett witch. Their previous one had died old age, they said, though Bonnie suspected darker causes, and the protective wards around the vampire mansion required Bennett blood to maintain. It was menial work, servant's work, but it put Bonnie in the same house as Elena Gilbert. She'd watched from the servants' gallery as Elena married Stefan Salvatore, the vampire alpha whose family had orchestrated the Bennett massacre a century before. Had watched her sister in white silk and diamonds, smiling up at the monster who killed their kind, and wanted to scream. But Elena looked happy. Elena looked loved. So Bonnie had swallowed her rage and learned to be invisible. For 3 years, she existed in Elena's shadow, close enough to see her sister's life, too far to be part of it. They passed in hallways, Bonnie's eyes downcast, Elena's distracted. Once, Elena had asked her name. Bonnie had answered, waited for recognition that never came, and understood that knowing about someone wasn't the same as knowing them. Then came the pregnancy, the difficult labor, the blood. "Get the Bennett witch," Stefan had commanded, and Bonnie had come, had held her sister's hand while Elena screamed and pushed and bled, had seen the moment Elena's eyes finally, truly focused on her face. "Bonnie," Elena's whisper was raw with pain and recognition. "Is it really you?" "I'm here." Bonnie's tears fell onto their joined hands. "I'm here, Elena. I wanted to know you." Elena gasped as another contraction seized her. "Father wouldn't let me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "It's okay." Lies came easily when someone you loved was dying. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it as the hours stretched, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. As Stefan paced and raged and the baby finally came, wailing and perfect and costly beyond measure, Elena's grip on Bonnie's hand was weakening. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll love him when I can't." Elena's eyes burned with desperate intensity. "Promise me you'll be Alaric's mother when I'm gone. You're my sister, Bonnie. You're the only one I trust." Bonnie had promised, even though it meant serving the man she hated, even though it meant raising a vampire's child, even though it meant staying in a house built on her family's graves. She'd promised because Elena was her sister, and some bonds ran deeper than blood. Even when blood was all that remained. Alaric Salvatore was 6 years old when the visions began, and Bonnie knew immediately that they were her fault. The first time, he'd been helping her in the garden, his small hands covered in soil as he planted wolfsbane under her careful instruction. He'd gone still, his pupils blown wide, and whispered, "2 lunas, 1 crown, 1 truth hidden." Bonnie's heart had stopped. She'd shaken him gently, watched awareness return to his eyes, and told herself it was nothing. Children said strange things. It didn't mean anything. But the visions kept coming. For 2 weeks, Alaric spoke in riddles that made the household seers exchange uncomfortable glances. They dismissed it as childhood imagination, the overactive mind of a hybrid caught between two powerful bloodlines. Stefan tried to be patient, but Bonnie could see the worry creasing his immortal face, the way he watched his son with something close to fear. It was Damon Salvatore who saw through her carefully constructed walls. Stefan's older brother had always been the sharper of the two, more cynical, more observant, more dangerous. He'd been watching her, she realized, with those cold blue eyes that missed nothing, watching how she flinched when anyone mentioned Elena, watching how she looked at Alaric with a devotion that went far beyond what any servant should feel. "You loved her," Damon said one evening, cornering her in the library where she was mending Alaric's torn shirt. "Elena, you loved her." Bonnie's hands didn't stop moving, didn't betray her racing heart. Everyone loved Lady Elena. "No," Damon leaned against the bookshelf, studying her. "You loved her differently, like you'd die for her, like you already are." She said nothing. There was nothing safe to say. Damon's laugh was soft and humorless. Secrets in the Salvatore house. How novel. He left her there, trembling, and Bonnie knew she was running out of time. She'd been teaching Alaric magic small things, harmless things, how to make flowers bloom out of season, how to feel the pull of the moon in his hybrid blood, things his vampire father couldn't teach him, things he needed to know about the witch side of his heritage. It was dangerous and foolish, but when Alaric looked at her with Elena's eyes and asked her to show him how to be strong, Bonnie couldn't refuse. She was falling in love with this child, had already fallen. This nephew she could never claim, this piece of her sister, this living promise that bound her to a house of monsters. Loving him terrified her more than anything Stefan could do. The violent vision came on a Tuesday. Alaric had been practicing levitation, making pebbles dance in the air, when his body went rigid. His eyes rolled back, his mouth opened, and Elena's voice, Elena's actual voice, the cadence Bonnie heard in her dreams spilled out. "Tell them the truth, Bonnie. Tell them who you are before it's too late." Bonnie caught him as he fell, her magic flaring instinctively to cushion the impact. She held him while his small body shook, while tears she couldn't control fell onto his dark hair. The ancestral magic was pushing, the Bennett dead, Elena's restless spirit, the truth that wouldn't stay buried, all of it pressing against the walls Bonnie had built. The magic wanted revelation, wanted justice, wanted her to stop hiding. But she couldn't. If Stefan learned she was Elena's sister, he would understand that she'd been lying for years, that her presence in his house was a deception. He would see betrayal where she'd offered only protection. He might forgive her. Stefan was capable of mercy, but he would never trust her again. Never let her near Alaric. And if Caroline learned, newly arrived and already suspicious, already measuring Bonnie with calculating eyes, Caroline would see exactly what Bonnie was, a threat. Another Gilbert, with a claim to Alaric's heart, a rival for the position of Luna, a woman the child already loved. Caroline would have her killed, quietly, efficiently, the way powerful people eliminated obstacles. So Bonnie held her nephew and lied to herself. Told herself she could keep hiding, told herself the visions would stop, told herself she wasn't running out of time. Above them, thunder rumbled though the sky was clear. The ancestors were getting impatient. The Cathedral of Saints had witnessed 3 centuries of Salvatore coronations, its ancient stones soaked in the weight of tradition and blood oaths. Today, every pew was filled with vampire nobility, the Michaelsons from the north, the Lockwoods from the west. Even the reclusive Fell family had sent representatives. Witch covens stood in their designated sections, their power humming like a second heartbeat beneath the vaulted ceiling. Bonnie stood in the servants' alcove, hidden behind a stone pillar, and watched Caroline Forbes prepare to become something she had no right to be. Caroline looked perfect. Of course she did. Golden hair swept into an intricate crown of braids, sapphire dress that complemented her pale skin, a smile that spoke of confidence and victory. She stood beside Stefan at the altar, her hand resting possessively on his arm, and if she noticed how rigid he was, how his jaw clenched, how his eyes looked anywhere but at her, she gave no sign. Stefan looked like a man attending his own execution. Alaric stood to his father's right, small and solemn in his formal robes, 6 years old and already learning to be stone-faced, to hide his feelings the way all Salvatore men did. But Bonnie could see the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes kept darting to her hiding place as if he could feel her there. The high priestess began the ancient words, her voice echoing through the cathedral. Bonnie's fingers dug into the stone pillar, her magic coiling tight beneath her skin, fighting for release. She shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be watching this obscenity, this replacement, this erasure of Elena. But she'd promised to protect Alaric, and that meant bearing witness to his new mother. The ceremony progressed with painful slowness, the blood oath, the territory acknowledgement, the vows that bound Alpha to Luna. Finally, the high priestess lifted the ceremonial veil, the ancient Salvatore heirloom woven with spells of loyalty and lineage. This was the moment of true binding, when Stefan would place it on Caroline's head and accept her into his bloodline. Stefan reached for the veil, his movements mechanical. Then Alaric's eyes began to glow. Not the red of vampire compulsion or the gold of wolf transformation, but pure amber, the color of hybrid magic, manifesting, raw and uncontrolled. His small body shook, power radiating from him in visible waves that made the candles flicker and the ancient windows rattle. Alaric. Stefan's voice cracked with panic. But the boy was already moving, faster than any 6-year-old should move, with supernatural speed that belonged to full-grown vampires. He ripped the veil from the high priestess's hands, tore it away from Caroline's reaching fingers, and his scream shattered the reverent silence. Not her. The ancestors reject her. The veil lifted from his hands as if caught by invisible wind. It floated, suspended in air that suddenly smelled of ozone and old magic, drifting past row after row of stunned witnesses. Past the Mickelsons, whose ancient eyes narrowed with interest. Past the witch covens, whose power rose in instinctive response. Past Stefan, whose face had gone white with shock. The veil settled at Bonnie's feet like a dove coming home to roost. Alaric collapsed, blood streaming from his nose, his small voice carrying through the cathedral with perfect, terrible clarity. "Aunt Bonnie." Mama said, "Aunt Bonnie, the true Luna." Bonnie stared at the veil, pooling around her worn servant's shoes, and felt 3 years of suppressed magic rise like a tidal wave. She'd kept it contained, kept it small, kept herself invisible and safe, but the veil knew. The Salvatore bloodline magic knew. The ancestors knew. The veil touched her hair, and Bonnie's magic erupted. Purple-white light exploded from her body. Bennett power mixing with something else, something that tasted of blood and moonlight, of vampire magic that had been calling to her since the moment Elena died. The Luna bond, dormant and denied, recognizing its true vessel. The light carved through the cathedral like lightning, illuminating every face turned toward her in shock. Bonnie saw Stefan frozen at the altar, saw Caroline's perfect face twisted with rage, saw Damon's knowing smirk, saw the witch covens rising with hands glowing in defensive response. She saw Alaric on the ground, smiling through the blood, whispering, "I knew it was you." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Vampires snarling, witches chanting, humans screaming. But all Bonnie could hear was her own heartbeat and Elena's dying voice. "Promise me you'll be Alaric's mother when I'm gone." The veil burned against her skin, binding her to a bloodline she'd sworn to destroy. Bonnie Bennett had run out of places to hide. Stefan Salvatore had been many things in his 5 centuries of existence: soldier, monster, killer, brother. But he'd never been a fool. So, when Bonnie Bennett's magic had painted the cathedral in impossible light, he'd smiled and thought, finally. He'd suspected for months, had stolen into the Gilbert estate's archives during a tedious political dinner, had found the birth certificate hidden in John Gilbert's private files. Bonnie Bennett, daughter of Abigail Bennett and John Gilbert, born the same year Elena turned 2. A secret that had cost John a fortune in silencing spells and hush money. But Damon had found something else in his digging, something that made his blood run cold, despite the centuries since he'd felt real fear. Caroline Forbes had known. Not suspected, known. She'd hired investigators, compiled evidence, and left a paper trail that spoke of cold calculation, notes in her own hand detailing how the Bennett witch would need to be removed once the Luna bond was secured. An accident in the kitchen, a fall down the stairs, something clean and deniable. Now, as chaos erupted around them and Stefan stood frozen at the altar, Damon stepped forward and did what brothers do. He burned everything to save what mattered. The ancestral magic has spoken. His voice cut through the noise, centuries of command forcing silence. Bonnie Bennett is Elena Gilbert's half-sister, John Gilbert's illegitimate daughter. The woman our dear brother has been treating as a servant is the sister of his dead Luna. Stefan's face drained of what little color immortality had left him. What? Elena knew. Damon's words were surgical, precise, designed to cut deep. She kept Bonnie close, hidden in plain sight. "Tell me, brother, why would she do that? Why would your dying mate's last words be about a servant witch?" Bonnie stood motionless, the veil still glowing against her dark hair, magic crackling around her like a living thing. She looked trapped, terrified, and furious all at once. "This is insane." Caroline's composure finally shattered, her perfect facade cracking like porcelain. "She's lying. She seduced him, manipulated Alaric. She's been using that child as a tool to worm her way into this family." "Have I?" Bonnie's voice was quiet, deadly. "Who changed his sheets when he had nightmares? Who taught him to read? Who held him when he cried for a mother he couldn't remember?" Her green eyes burned into Caroline's blue ones. "You've been here 3 months. I've been raising Elena's son for 3 years. You're a servant. I'm his aunt." The words exploded from Bonnie like a confession and a curse. "Elena's sister. His blood. And I've loved him since the moment he was born, because I promised my sister, my dying sister, that I would protect him from people exactly like you." The cathedral had gone silent. Even the ancient vampires leaned forward, hungry for this drama that broke centuries of tradition. Klaus Mikkelsen rose from his seat, the original hybrid's presence commanding attention without effort. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 years when he spoke. The ancestral magic doesn't lie. He descended the steps with predatory grace, his eyes fixed on the still glowing veil. The Luna bond chooses based on soul compatibility, not politics or bloodline convenience. It recognizes power, yes, but also love, sacrifice, and truth. He stopped before Bonnie, tilting his head as if seeing her for the first time. If Bonnie Bennett carries Gilbert witch power and Bennett ancient magic, if she's been protecting the Alpha's heir for 3 years, if the ancestral magic itself claims her. He turned to Stefan. She is more qualified than any vampire-witch alliance could produce. Stefan stared at Bonnie as if seeing a ghost. Elena told me to take care of you. I thought she meant I didn't understand. She meant I was family. Bonnie's voice broke. She meant I was alone and grieving, and the only person in this mansion who would love Alaric the way she did. She meant... Her breath hitched. She meant I was her sister, Stefan, and you've spent 3 years not seeing me at all. Caroline lunged forward, but Damon caught her arm with casual violence. I found your notes, darling. The ones about arranging accidents. Did you really think you could murder a Bennett witch in a Salvatore mansion and get away with it? The crowd's murmur rose like a tide. Stefan looked from Bonnie to his son, still unconscious, still bleeding, still smiling, and Bonnie saw the moment something broke behind his eyes. The careful control, the political calculations, the years of doing what was expected rather than what was right. Choose, brother, Damon said softly. Accept what the ancestors have given you, or reject their blessing and watch this coven crumble. Stefan's choice would damn them all, one way or another. The first attempt came 2 hours after sunset, delivered by a servant Bonnie had shared meals with for 3 years. The blood wine was traditional, a gesture of welcome from the Forbes family to acknowledge Bonnie's new position. It sat on her chamber dresser in a crystal decanter, deep red and innocent, while Bonnie stood at the window and tried to process that she had a chamber now, that Stefan had given her Elena's rooms, that the veil still glowed faintly in her hair, refusing to be removed. Don't drink that. Damon appeared in her doorway without knocking, moved faster than thought, and shattered the decanter against the stone floor. The wine hissed where it touched the rug, eating through fabric like acid. Bonnie stared at the smoking hole. Caroline's mother? Liz Forbes has always been efficient. Damon crouched, sniffing the fumes. Wolfsbane, belladonna, and something nastier. You'd have been dead in minutes. He looked up at her, and for once, his expression was serious. They're going to keep trying. He was right. The second attempt came an hour later, not poison, but magic. 3 Bennett witches materialized in her chambers, their faces twisted with righteous fury. Bonnie recognized them. Distant cousins who'd always treated her with barely concealed contempt. You don't deserve this. The eldest witch's hands glowed with violent energy. Your servant class, inferior blood. If someone like you can become Luna, what does that make us? What does that do to the hierarchy that's kept our people safe for centuries? Bonnie felt her own power rise, felt 3 years of suppression uncoiling like a serpent. Safe? Or small? They attacked together, 3 against 1. Their combined magic meant to overwhelm and destroy. But Bonnie was Bennett and Gilbert both, carrier of 2 ancient bloodlines that had been waiting for her to stop hiding. Her magic exploded outward in purple-white flames that consumed their spells like paper, that sent them flying back against the walls with force that cracked stone. Get out! Her voice resonated with ancestral power. And tell the others, I didn't ask for this, but I won't apologize for it either. They fled, leaving scorch marks on her floor. The third attempt came at midnight, and it came from family. Stefan's aunt, Sage, had been a Salvatore for 4 centuries, had loved Elena like a daughter, had wept at her funeral. Now she stood in Bonnie's doorway with a wooden stake and murder in her ancient eyes. You dishonor her. Sage's voice shook with grief and rage. Taking her place, sleeping in her bed, wearing her veil, Elena loved you. And this is how you repay her. Elena wanted this. Bonnie's magic hummed beneath her skin, exhausted but ready. Her last words were asking me to... Liar! Sage lunged with supernatural speed. Damon intercepted her mid-strike, his hand closing around her throat, his own face contorted with fury. "She's telling the truth, Aunt. I've seen Elena's letters, heard Alaric's visions. Elena knew what she was doing. Then Elena was wrong." Sage struggled against Damon's grip. This half-breed servant. Bonnie's power erupted without conscious thought, pure instinct, and 3 years of accumulated rage. Magic poured from her in a tsunami of purple light that filled the chamber, that made the walls tremble and the windows shatter. Not just Bennett magic or Gilbert spells, but something older, something that resonated with the lunar bond itself, vampire and witch magic, intertwining in ways that shouldn't be possible. The force of it threw Sage across the room, pinned her against the wall, and Bonnie felt ancestral knowledge flooding through her. Spells Elena had never mastered, power Elena had never accessed. The full potential of 2 bloodlines without the limitations, without the compromises. Stefan appeared in the doorway, drawn by the magical explosion, and stopped dead at the sight of Bonnie haloed in impossible light. "My God," he whispered, "you're stronger than she was." Bonnie released Sage, let the woman collapse, gasping to the floor, and met Stefan's stunned gaze. Elena knew. That's why she made me promise. That's why she kept me close. Her voice broke. She was preparing the way for me, Stefan. She took the lunar position because I was too young, too untrained, too afraid. But she always knew that you were meant for this. Stefan's words were barely audible. That she was keeping the seat warm. Damon released Sage, who fled without another word, and studied Bonnie with newfound respect. 3 assassination attempts in one night. That might be a record. Will there be more? Bonnie's legs trembled with exhaustion and adrenaline. Definitely. Damon's smile was sharp. Welcome to being Luna, little witch. Everyone wants you dead. But as Bonnie looked at the destruction around her, the shattered windows, the scorched walls, the evidence of power she'd spent years suppressing, she felt something unexpected settle in her chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Acceptance. Elena had given her this gift, this terrible crown, and Bonnie would honor it the only way she knew how. By surviving, by protecting Alaric, by becoming the Luna her sister had believed she could be. Even if it killed her. Caroline Forbes had never learned to hide behind servants' doors or swallow her ambitions like bitter medicine. So when she cornered Bonnie in the West Tower chamber, far from guards, far from witnesses, she wore her rage like jewelry. You actually thought you won. Caroline's laugh was crystal and poison. Standing there in Elena's veil, playing the tragic martyr. Stefan looking at you with those puppy eyes, finally seeing you. It's almost touching. Bonnie's magic stirred beneath her skin, exhausted from 3 assassination attempts, but far from dormant. If you're here to kill me yourself, get on with it. Oh, I will. But first I want you to know something. Caroline circled her like a predator, heels clicking on stone. I've known about you for years, Bonnie. Known exactly who you were. Who do you think convinced John Gilbert to keep you separated from Elena? The words hit like a physical blow. What? Elena wanted to bring you into the family when you were 16. Did you know that? She came to your father, begged him to acknowledge you, to let her have a sister. Caroline's smile was cruel and beautiful. I was courting Stefan even then, planning my future. I couldn't have some bastard half-sister complicating things. So I whispered to John about scandal, about his wife's fragile health, about how the Gilbert name would be destroyed. I made him afraid. Bonnie's hands curled into fists, magic crackling purple around her knuckles. Elena never knew. Elena was weak. Caroline spat the words like venom. She actually loved you, wrote letters she never sent, kept a picture of your mother hidden in her diary. It was pathetic. She had everything: legitimacy, power, Stefan's devotion, and she risked it all for a sister she'd never met. She was better than you could ever be. She was stupid. Caroline's composure cracked, revealing something desperate and jagged underneath. And when she got pregnant with that hybrid abomination so dangerous, the healers gave her a 30% chance of survival. I encouraged her to go through with it. Told her Stefan would be devastated if she terminated. Told her a true Luna would sacrifice anything for her alpha's legacy. The truth crystallized in Bonnie's mind, sharp as broken glass. You killed her. I gave her a choice. She chose wrong. Caroline's eyes glowed with vampire bloodlust. And now I'm going to finish what I started. She attacked with supernatural speed, but Bonnie was ready. Their collision shook the chamber, vampire strength meeting witch magic, Caroline's dark spells crashing against Bonnie's ancestral power. Caroline had been studying, Bonnie realized with horrifying clarity. Years of preparation, forbidden spells, magic that tasted like graveyard dirt and broken oaths. You're strong, Caroline hissed, her hands wrapped around Bonnie's throat. But I've been planning this since before you knew what you were. Bonnie's magic exploded outward, breaking Caroline's grip, sending them both flying to opposite sides of the chamber. Blood ran from Bonnie's nose, her power reserves dangerously low. But Caroline was already rising, already chanting in a language older than the cathedral itself. Dark magic filled the room like smoke. Then Alaric screamed. The sound came from above them, from his chambers, piercing and wrong. Bonnie felt it through the incomplete lunar bond, felt his life force flickering like a candle in wind, felt something vital draining away. What did you do? Bonnie's voice was raw with terror. Caroline's smile was triumphant. The lunar bond requires completion, a blood ritual, a claiming, an acceptance from the Alpha. Without it, the ancestral magic feeds on the Heir instead. It's been 3 hours since the Veil chose you, Bonnie. How much longer do you think a 6-year-old hybrid can survive? Alaric screamed again, and Bonnie felt her own heart stutter in response. You can fight me, Caroline continued, her dark magic swelling, or you can save him, but you can't do both. Choose, sister. The word was mockery and murder and ultimatum all at once. Bonnie looked at Caroline, at the woman who'd orchestrated Elena's death, who'd kept 2 sisters apart, who would kill a child to claim a crown she'd never deserved, and felt something shift inside her. Not rage. Not anymore. Certainty. I choose him. Bonnie's magic changed color, shifting from purple to the white gold of pure ancestral power. I will always choose him. She ran, leaving Caroline's laughter echoing behind her, racing toward Alaric's chambers as the incomplete lunar bond tried to consume them both. Above her, her nephew's screams grew weaker. Bonnie prayed she wasn't already too late. The attack came at dawn, when vampires should have been weakest, when the sun's first light gilded the mansion's eastern walls. But Stefan's uncle Marcus had planned for centuries, and he didn't believe in fair fights. Bonnie was still in Alaric's chambers, her hands pressed to his fevered forehead, trying to stabilize the lunar bond that was eating him alive. The boy's breathing was shallow, his small chest barely rising, and Bonnie could feel her own life force being pulled toward him in a desperate, incomplete connection. Please, she whispered to ancestors she'd never trusted. Please, not him. Take me instead. Then the windows exploded inward. Marcus Salvatore entered with 20 vampires at his back, all of them armed with weapons that hummed with anti-magic wards. Bonnie felt her power dampen immediately, felt it compress against her skin like a cage. "So this is what we've come to." Marcus's voice dripped with aristocratic disdain. "A servant witch playing Luna while our Alpha's heir dies from her incompetence. This coven has fallen far." Bonnie stood, positioning herself between the vampires and Alaric's bed. "You'll have to go through me." "That," Marcus smiled, "was always the plan." His faction attacked with military precision flanking movements, coordinated strikes, magic-dampening nets designed to capture witches alive for public execution. Bonnie fought with what power she could access, with physical strength she'd built, scrubbing floors and hauling water, with desperate maternal fury that made her faster than she should be. But there were too many, and her magic was trapped, and Alaric was dying behind her. Then the boy's hand found hers. Alaric's eyes opened not amber this time, but something stranger. Red and gold simultaneously, vampire and wolf and witch all bleeding together in his hybrid irises. Power flooded through their joined hands, his abilities somehow sharing themselves with her, the incomplete lunar bond, creating a connection that shouldn't exist. Bonnie gasped as vampire strength surged through her body, as her witch magic exploded past the dampening wards, because it wasn't just witch magic anymore, it was hybrid power, the same impossible combination that ran through Alaric's veins, that had killed Elena, giving birth to it. She was Bennett, and Gilbert, and Salvatore, all at once. Marcus's confident smile faltered. Bonnie moved with supernatural speed, her magic and vampire strength working in perfect synchronization. She shattered weapons with blasts of purple light, broke bones with blows that would have destroyed a human, fought like Elena must have fought in those final moments, desperately, brutally, for the child she loved more than her own survival. "Enough!" Stefan's roar shook the mansion as he appeared in the doorway, Damon at his side. His eyes found Bonnie blood-covered, glowing with hybrid power, standing over his son, and something ancient and furious awakened in his expression. "You dare attack my Luna?" Stefan's voice carried the weight of 5 centuries. "You dare threaten my heir?" "That servant is not," Marcus began. "She is everything Elena saw in her." Stefan crossed the room in a blur of movement, his power rolling off him like thunder. Everything this coven needed and was too blind to recognize. Stefan fought like the vampire legends described, vicious, efficient, merciless. 500 years of accumulated skill and rage focused into pure violence. But when he fought beside Bonnie, something else emerged. Her magic amplified his strength. His vampire abilities enhanced her spells, and together they were what the Salvatore Coven had always been meant to be. Vampire and witch in perfect, terrible harmony. They didn't just defeat Marcus's faction, they destroyed it. Bonnie's magic burned through anti-witch wards like paper. Stefan's strength shattered ancient vampire defenses. Bodies fell, traditionalist vampires fled, and by the time the sun fully rose, Marcus knelt in his own blood with Stefan's hand at his throat. "You wanted pure vampire rule." Stefan's voice was soft and deadly. "You wanted to eliminate the hybrid alliance? Look at what that alliance just did to you." He gestured to the carnage around them. "This is the future, Uncle. Vampire and witch together, stronger than either bloodline alone. Adapt or die." Marcus chose death, lunging for Stefan's heart in a final, desperate attack. Stefan snapped his neck with casual efficiency. The remaining traditionalists fled into the dawn, and Stefan turned to find Bonnie collapsed beside Alaric's bed, her hybrid borrowed power fading as the boy's breathing finally stabilized. "You fought," Stefan said quietly, kneeling beside her. "For a coven that's never valued you. You fought." Bonnie looked at Alaric, at his small chest rising and falling with renewed strength, and understood what Elena had always known. I fought for him, for the future hybrid children who'll need someone to show them they belong. She met Stefan's gaze. I fought for what this coven could be, not what it is. Stefan's hand covered hers, and for the first time, Bonnie saw what Elena must have seen in him. Not just the monster, but the man who could choose to be better. "Help me make it worthy of you," he said. Outside, the sun rose on a coven forever changed.